All right, everyone, it's your boy Genius out at the range today. In front of the video, I just want to say, if you don't know Jesus Christ as your Savior, if you don't know you're going to heaven, make sure you take care of that today. If you don't know how, ask me how. Be glad to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with you. Also, go over, consider supporting me on Patreon so I can continue to keep doing these videos. $5 a month, cancel anytime. Super thanks on YouTube. I get that money as well. And also, you can go over to gsquaredtactical.com and hit on the 3 lines in the corner, and the screen will pop down, support channel, donate directly to me through the website, or pick up some gear, some hats, some shirts, cup holders, things of that nature we have over there for sale. Either way, I got the FN Reflex as promised back out at the range. I put XL, FN Reflex XL. So when I picked this up, as I mentioned in the video, the initial range video, it felt to me exactly like my X Macro, which if you've watched the channel very often, you know that I'm very fond of that gun. I've carried it a lot, so I'm very, very familiar with it. And I promised that I would do a comparison. I'm kind of out of my element when I do these types of things. They're not easy for me to do because I'm not theatrical, don't have the camera equipment that some others do, but I'm gonna do my best to overlay with some pictures. But I'm gonna start with the FN here, just holding the FN, and I'm gonna do a little trigger test, if you will, just because again, that's what the most asked question I had when I put up the initial video. How's the trigger? How's the trigger? Because, you know, the trigger on the original Reflex was not that great. So definitely better. As I mentioned in the video, definitely better than the original, but it has this weird hinge thing. I can't stand hinge triggers. That's why I don't like the Smith & Wesson, the older Smith & Wesson triggers. Then they did the center blade safety triggers and managed to make them worse, but I don't really like those either. So I'm a fan of the trigger on the SIG, no question about that, but it is much, much better than the original Reflex. So you have that little hinge thing. If you want to call that take up, I guess it's what it is, but it's more so that it is disengaging that hinge, or I can only assume some type of safety or something. It hits a wall, and it is a very much so rolling brake, but it is very, very predictable, so it doesn't necessarily sneak up on you. It's about 4.2, 4.3 pounds on my trigger gauge. Has a nice audible and tactile reset, but it does come out pretty far. It's not a short reset by any stretch of the imagination. So, but the trigger is way, way better than the original Reflex, if you like that one. So bear with me, I'm gonna grab the Tac Ops, which I believe the Tac Ops to be very much more comparable than is the Fuse. Now, I think maybe some people were asking about the Fuse because of the way that it's made on the end, the Fuse versus the FN Reflex. It's more comparable to the X Macro, as you can see from the size. It's almost identical in size. Of course, the X Macro has the 3-slot pick rail up front, whereas the Reflex only has the single, and the slide comes out past the dust cover, unlike it does on the X Macro. So I'm sure that just cuts down on weight. I like the look of that better. You know, I've never had a problem putting lights, lasers with a single versus 3, so I don't really care one way or the other. So the trigger on the X Macro, this is the Tac Ops version, of course, but the only thing different is the flared mag well and extended slide lock, and it comes with 4 17-round magazines. So trigger's got a little bit of take up, no hinge, no center blade safety, anything like that. Just a flat face trigger with a little curvature at the bottom, a little bit of take up. Also has a rolling brake that is predictable. So the trigger has a better reset, more tactile, more audible, and definitely shorter. And the follow-up, they always catch, don't they? The SIGs do. So definitely, I like the trigger better on the X Macro. So I'm gonna grab the Fuse here. Now the Fuse, of course, is a little bit longer. And okay, I'm gonna talk about the weights and stuff here in a second. We're just talking about the trigger right now. So About the same amount of take up, same flat face trigger. Seems to have more of a rolling brake on this one, so it's not quite as predictable as it is on the X Macro. Very similar, if not the same reset. So out of the three, I would say that the X Macro has the best trigger. Okay, I have shot it a lot more. I've probably put about 1,500 rounds through it, so I'm very familiar with it. And also the fuse here, I've put about 1,000 rounds through it, so I'm pretty doggone familiar with it as well. I put 200 rounds through the FN Reflex yesterday. So just to talk about some of the differences, so they all have, of course, front and rear serrations. The fuse being the most aggressive of the three, right? Way more aggressive. But if we're just comparing the two that are most comparable, which is the X Macro versus the Reflex here, the serrations on the Reflex are much deeper, way more functional, and the slide on the Reflex is way more easy to manipulate if someone has problems with hand strength or whatever. Just way easier. Even if it didn't have those great serrations on there, it would be way easier to manipulate the slide. So better serrations on the FN Reflex, better texturing on the grip. I like the texturing on the Reflex, or most FNs better. Has the needle points on the front, not quite as aggressive on the rear, and then just the sandpaper type consistency on each side. So overall, I like the grip texture on this one better. This one weighs in at 20 ounces. I believe the X Macro is 21.5 or 21.3 or something. So, and then the fuse is like 23. Okay, so this one is lighter of the three, and you can definitely tell it. I know we're talking about a matter of ounces, but when it comes to a gun, a little bit of length, a little bit less poundage on the trigger, all of that makes a huge difference. So you can definitely tell the weight difference between the Reflex and the X Macro and the fuse. This definitely carries better. So I waited to come out to the range a little bit later today so I could carry the X Macro in this one. I didn't carry the fuse, but the X Macro in this one definitely carries better. It's more comfortable, of course, lighter, super thin, and so it carries a lot better. It has my favorite front sight on there. As you know, if you've watched the channel, I love the orange or red front night sight, tritium field here with the blacked out rear. Same type of setup on the X Macro, except it's green on the front, which I do not like. You have a better co-witness with this one, so I don't know if the cut is deeper in the slide or if the sights are slightly higher, but I do have a more 1/8-ish co-witness with this Vortex Defender. I had to put the Romeo Zero on the X Macro just to be able to use the rear sight that's integrated into it, as it's more flush. The rear sight on the gun is more flush with the rear, actually slightly, ever so slightly lower, so you just don't get as good of a co-witness. So if I'm just shooting with irons with the X Macro, I tend to shoot a little low. Shooting with just the irons on this one is dead where I'm pointing it, so I get a better co-witness with this one. Not great, wish it was better, but definitely a better co-witness on this one. And the takedowns are very similar, so you know, it's neither here nor there with that. I can easily manipulate the mag release on all of them without, you know, really adjusting my grip on the gun. So have no issue with that. So this one has a plastic guide rod. The X Macro has a metal guide rod. So, you know, the fuse has a plastic guide rod as well. So I'm kind of a little bit of a snob about that. I like my metal guide rods. I just feel like I understand the whole, well, it's plastic and it doesn't beat up the inside of your gun, makes for better recoil response, some people say. I don't know if I agree with that or not. I just watch the comments in the comment section, but I just don't like a flimsy plastic guide rod. This does have a plastic guide rod. So overall, without pulling the trigger a single time on the gun, which one do I like better? Looks, feel in the hand, just trigger, sight system, sight setup. Without ever pulling the trigger on it, does have this little weep hole at the back of the barrel, the loaded chamber indicator, which I absolutely hate because it does inundate my optic with GSR. And you have the peephole on the X Macro as well, and you also have the peephole on the fuse. So they all have the I'm going to throw GSR all over your and oil all over your glass symptoms. So how do they shoot? So that is what it really boils down to. So I'm going to shoot each one of them right now, just not for accuracy, not for anything, just recoil, which one feels better, shoots better, because ultimately the serrations, the sights, all of the different things that you like about a gun sitting on the shelf means absolutely nothing if you don't shoot well with it. And I'm going to start with the Reflex. I know I just shot this yesterday, so I still have a good feel for it, but I'm going to shoot it first. Again, not really shooting for accuracy. I put 200 rounds through this gun yesterday, so let's just shoot the gun and then shoot the other ones and compare them as far as shootability. So, as I mentioned yesterday, over the original Reflex, if you hated it or had disdain for it like I did because of the snappiness and stuff, that won't be the case with this one. This is a very good shooter. So I'm going to go to the next one, which honestly, I'm just going to shoot you straight. It's going to be hard to beat. It's been one of my favorite concealed carry or EDCs since I bought the gun. So I already have a little bit of a bias towards this one, I guess, but the only beef I've ever had with it is having to change out those sights because I don't have a great co-witness. So I'm very, very dependent on my red dot functioning and not having a problem. So let's just shoot this one, and I'll talk about the recoil difference between them. So this one is a little heavier, as mentioned already, so I expected it to handle the recoil a little bit better, but we shall see. Definitely handles the recoil a little bit better. I mean, I don't know if you'll be able to pick it up on camera. I try to set the camera in such a way that you can see the recoil yourself, but definitely better recoil response with the X Macro. And with it having a better trigger, I definitely can get faster follow-up shots. So I definitely feel as though I shot better with this one versus the Reflex. And I'm going to shoot the fuse as well. Again, I don't think it's necessarily a super fair comparison because, you know, it is a little bit bigger, a little bit longer, so you would expect it to be a little bit more accurate. Definitely have a way, way better co-witness. They should have put these sights on the X Macro, and for me, it would have been a perfect gun. But of course, they did not. So we have what we have here. As the smoke begins to accumulate in the sun and covers my target up, it makes it difficult for me to see my optic. Either way, I'm sure you'll be able to tell on camera that this one handles the recoil like a boss, but again, you would expect it to because of the of it being longer, just overall heavier. You would expect it to handle the recoil a little bit better than the other ones. So my X Macro, which of course is the TAC Ops, came with 4 17-round magazines. I'm pretty sure that if you just get the original, which I've never had, the non-TAC Ops version, I think it comes with 2 17-rounders. Maybe it comes with 2 17s and a 21. I'm not completely sure. I'm sure someone will let me know in the comment section, which I would be glad for you to do. But we have 18 rounds and a 17 round on the, I'm sorry, 18 rounds and a 15 round on the Reflex. So very similar in that way. So feel in the hand. Now I have not changed this grip module. I know some people said do that, change the grip module. I have not changed the grip module on this. This is the factory grip module. But feel in the hand, just overall carryability, definitely the FN Reflex. So, and let's talk about price a little bit. So even today, even right now, the non-tac ops version of this on some of the cheapest places you could find it online is about $650. Okay, the fuse is running somewhere closer to 800, and the FN Reflex, even being brand new to the market, is somewhere around $599. So that has to be a contributing factor as well, correct? So as it begins to age and kind of lose some of its popularity, if it ever gets any, it's probably going to come down in price. So overall, it's going to be about $100, $150 cheaper than the X Macro. So you have to ask yourself, if I shoot really well with it, if I overall like it, would I pick it because of the price difference? Well, that's a good question. But either way, so far, I'm still liking the X Macro, but I'm also not hating the FN Reflex. I'm really not at all. So I'm going to get the camera turned around, standing here at about 10 yards, and I'm going to try my best to shoot for accuracy with each one of them. I don't have but one camera, so I'm going to turn them around. I'll tell you which one I'm shooting with, and we can look at the accuracy on it, and we'll see which one I'm shooting better with, more accurately with. Okay, I'm going to start out with the FN Reflex. Again, standing here, Reflex XL. I have to keep on saying that. Standing here at 10 yards, again, just shooting for the dead center of that 8-inch plate, and we'll see how it goes. Not too bad. I pulled two to the left, but that was totally on me. So let's get the X Macro out and see how she does. Okay, so now what I have is the X Macro. Again, 10 yards. I only put 15 rounds in the magazine to be fair with the Reflex. Again, just shooting for dead center of the target. Well, I can't remember what the FN target looked like, so I don't know if that's better or worse. I'm wanting to say it's very similar, maybe the same. I don't know. I'm sure you guys will let me know. So now I'm going to get the fuse. Not sure if that's really comparable to this gun, but I did say that I would do both. So I'm going to get the fuse and going to put 15 through it as well, see how that turns out. All right, so now I have the fuse, same thing, 15 rounds, 10 yards, and do have my co-witness with the fuse, or a better one, should I say. But I'm going to use the red dot, the Romeo X on here. Let's see how it goes. I have a tendency to shoot a little bit faster with this because of the trigger and just overall, you know, it's a good shooter. I think I probably shot a good bit faster than I did with the other two. Still a nice little group. Again, I think they're all pretty comparable. Might have been pulling a little bit low on that, but either way, this comparison mostly is for the standard X Macro and the FN Reflex. So I'm gonna turn the camera around and give my final assessment. Okay, so I decided to shoot the Reflex one more time, just simply because you have to understand I have a ton of rounds through the X Macro. I've shot it a lot, carried it a lot. We got about 1,500 rounds through it, event free, I might add. But so I haven't shot the Reflex as much. So I just want to, I don't know, I'm struggling. Me wanting to shoot it again tells you that, but let's see. 10 yards again, FN Reflex. Well, I don't think there can be any arguing about how tight that is. I don't know, man. Anyway, get the camera turned around, let's talk about it. Man, I hate doing long videos because I know people have short attention spans, but again, trying to compare 3 guns and condense it all into a small package is not an easy thing to do. Try to put the pictures over top of you know, showing the difference in the size and all of that kind of stuff, and then try to memorize all the specs and weights and that kind of thing is not an easy thing to do. But here's where I'm at with it. I really like this gun, okay? Now, I know, much like some people have said about the Kimber and the Kimber Mako and how much I liked it, and some of the issues they've had with Kimber in the past and how that's really keeping them from taking that leap, if you will, to buy the Kimber, the Mako. And I get it, I totally do. So if you had a bad experience with the original Reflex, I completely get it. I was there with you if that be the case. But I really, really like this gun. It feels like a feather in your hand, and you would think that you know, it would be more snappy than it is, but it really doesn't feel that much more snappy. I don't know, maybe you could pick it up a little better on camera. I will while I'm editing the video, but it doesn't feel any more snappy than the X Macro or certainly the Fuse, maybe just ever so slightly. But the way I was able to hold a tight group at 10 yards like that in the direct sun, I don't know. I really like the guns, what I'm trying to say. Is it going to take the place of my rotation of the X Macro? To be honest with you, it might actually. Just simply because of, not because it has a better trigger, because it doesn't, but because I have my co-witness. Obviously, I held a tight, very tight group on 2 different occasions, actually more tight on the second one. But mostly just because of how light and easy it is to carry this gun. And again, price point on this is still lower than those 2. So I don't know. The jury's still out for me, but I don't hate this gun. And if I was forced to give up the X Macro for this, I wouldn't be mad about it. It's basically what I'm trying to say. Just leave your questions and I'll be sure to answer anything that I can. Again, tough to do a comparison between 3 guns in a short video. I am going to shoot this some more. I'm going to do another video on this, shooting some 124 and some 147 to try to determine the difference between the recoil, you know, running maybe some plus P or some higher grain ammunition. I'm already familiar with how that goes in the X Macro and the Fuse. Of course, a little more snappy, but not too terribly bad. So I'll be able to give you a good assessment on a separate video shooting some, you know, some defensive ammunition. Again, thanks so much for watching. Hit the thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe. Check out Patreon, G2 Tactical. And as always, make sure you know Jesus Christ is your Savior, and to God be the glory.